The council's 17th grand chamber of the Vulcar sovereignty stretched like a cathedral carved from black crystal. Towering pillars supported a ceiling that seemed to reach into infinity, each surface etched with the names of conquered worlds. At the chamber's heart sat the Council of Dominion, 12 figures whose word held the power of life and death over billions. Today, they gathered to discuss a matter they considered barely worth their time. The humans of Earth. Supreme Commander Zarkith stood at the center of the council floor. His forearms crossed in a gesture of barely contained amusement. His exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian, and his compound eyes sparkled with cruel intelligence. For 30 cycles, he had served the sovereignty, crushing resistance on 40 worlds. The very mention of Earth made his mandibles click in what passed for laughter among his kind. The eldest counselor, Vermanix, leaned forward from his elevated throne. His voice echoed through the chamber with the weight of centuries. The humans, he began, his tone dripping with disdain, continued to expand their pathetic colonies into sectors we claimed generations ago. What is your assessment, Commander? Zarkith swept his gaze across the council, ensuring every eye was upon him. They are insects pretending to be predators, he declared. 3 cycles ago, we tested their defenses at the Proxima outpost. 6 of their destroyers attacked my advance guard. Outdated weapons, fragile hulls, primitive tactics. We disabled 4 before the others fled like cowards. Murmurs of satisfaction rippled through the council. Another counselor, Kreshala, tapped her clawed fingers against her armrest. Yet they survived, she noted. Some call that resilience. Zarkith's laughter was harsh. They call it luck. I call it mercy. We left them alive as a message, to show them the futility of resistance. It has not worked. They have only grown bolder, establishing 3 new colonies in the past cycle alone. Now is the time to finish what we started. The council chamber's holographic display activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of human space. A handful of blue points marked Earth's colonies, pathetic specks compared to the vast red territories of the sovereignty. Intelligence reports suggested the human fleet consisted of perhaps 300 vessels, mostly small frigate-class ships and aging cruisers. Against the Velkar armada of tens of thousands, they were nothing. This should have ended long ago, another counselor growled. Why have we tolerated their existence? Zarkith knew the answer. The humans occupied regions rich in rare minerals that required delicate extraction. The sovereignty had planned to let them do the hard work of mining before sweeping in to claim the spoils. But human expansion had grown too aggressive. They had established mining operations on 17 worlds, built shipyards in orbit of 3 more, and worst of all, they had begun reaching out to other minor species with talk of alliances and cooperation. The time for patience is over, Zarkith announced. I request permission to assemble an assault fleet. 200 warships, enough to sweep aside their entire navy in a single engagement. We will strike at their heart, destroy their orbital defenses, and show the galaxy what happens to those who defy the sovereignty. Silence fell across the chamber as the counselors considered. Then, one by one, they raised their hands in approval. Vermanix's voice carried the weight of final judgment. You have our blessing, Commander. Bring us human worlds as trophies, or do not return. Zarkith bowed low, his heart pounding with anticipation. Within a cycle, he would be remembered as the commander who broke humanity's foolish resistance. The thought filled him with satisfaction as he departed the chamber to begin preparations. The Velkar fleet assembled at the staging grounds of Krath Prime, a military fortress that had launched 1,000 conquests. Massive dreadnoughts, each 3 times the size of humanity's largest vessels, formed the core of the armada. Flanking them were sleek destroyers, heavy cruisers bristling with weapons, and carrier ships that held swarms of fighter craft. The combined firepower could reduce entire continents to ash within hours. Zarkith stood on the bridge of his flagship, the inexorable Judgment, watching the final ships fall into formation. His tactical officer approached with a data tablet. "All vessels report ready, Commander. The fleet awaits your order." Zarkith studied the glowing tactical display. The route to human space would take them through the Veil Nebula, a region of dense cosmic dust that would mask their approach. Human sensors were primitive. They would never detect the fleet until it was too late. "Set course," he commanded. The Velkar armada surged forward, engines burning bright against the darkness of space. Inside the flagship, the crew worked with practiced efficiency, but their mood was light, almost celebratory. This was not a battle. It was an execution. In the recreation areas, soldiers boasted about which human colony they would claim as personal trophies. Some wagered on how quickly the human fleet would break and run. 3 days into the journey, the fleet reached the edge of human territorial space. Zarkith ordered his scouts forward, small stealth vessels that could observe without being detected. They returned with exactly what he expected. Minimal military presence, just a handful of patrol frigates running predictable routes. The humans had no idea death was coming. The commander allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Everything was proceeding perfectly. By this time tomorrow, human space would be in flames, and the sovereignty's dominance would be unchallenged. But as the fleet pushed deeper into the Veil Nebula, something unexpected occurred. The science officer's antenna twitched in confusion as she studied her console. "Commander, I am detecting an anomaly." "Where?" "On long-range sensors. There is a void, a gap in the stellar background. It is large, approximately 12.7 kilometers in length." Zarkith's irritation was immediate. "Check your equipment. Cosmic dust in the nebula is distorting your readings." The officer's mandibles clicked nervously. "I have run 3 separate diagnostics. The instruments are functioning correctly. This is not dust interference. Whatever is creating this void, it is solid. It is blocking starlight." The bridge fell quiet. Other officers turned from their stations to look at the main display. The tactical screen showed what the science officer had discovered: a massive dark shape, visible only as an absence of stars, drifting in the void ahead of them. "It is probably a rogue asteroid or derelict station," Zarkith said, though doubt crept into his voice. "Adjust course to pass around it. We have no time for investigations." But even as he gave the order, the void began to move. Not drifting with natural momentum, but turning deliberately, as if aware of their presence. Power reading spiking, the science officer called out, her voice rising with alarm. "The void is generating massive energy signatures. My instruments cannot measure the upper limits. They are exceeding our computational capacity. ZAR single quotes KETH felt the first cold touch of unease. "Magnify that region," he snapped. "Show me what we are dealing with." The main view screen zoomed in on the void, resolution increasing with each second. At first, there was only darkness. Then, gradually, details emerged. The shape was not natural. It had structure, geometric patterns, hard edges where starlight caught on metal surfaces. "This is a vessel," the tactical officer whispered. "But nothing this size should exist." Before Zarkith could respond, a single bright light pierced the darkness. Then another. Then dozens more, arranged in precise patterns along an impossibly vast hull. The lights were running lights, illuminating a ship that dwarfed everything the Velkar had ever constructed. The vessel emerged from the shadows like a mountain rising from an ocean. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, covered in armor plating thick enough to withstand planet-killing weapons. Towers rose from its surface like skyscrapers, sensor arrays bristling from every angle. Along its flanks, weapon ports yawned open, each barrel larger than an entire Velkar destroyer. And there, etched into the hull in letters 100 meters tall. Glowing with pale blue light were symbols in a language the Velkar had learned to recognize, the letters spelling out eternal vigilance. And below them, the insignia of Earth's Navy. The bridge of the inexorable judgment descended into chaos. "Impossible," someone shouted. "Humans cannot build something like this. Their technology is decades behind ours. It is a trick, a hologram meant to frighten us." But the sensors told a different story. The readings were real. This vessel existed, solid and terrible, and it was now moving with deliberate slowness toward the Velkar fleet. Zarkith's 3 hearts hammered in his chest as he stared at the screen. For the first time in his long career, he felt the icy grip of genuine fear. Inside the Leviathan-class dreadnought Eternal Vigilance, the atmosphere could not have been more different. The bridge was a vast space of clean lines and soft lighting, more like a research facility than a warship. Officers sat at their stations with calm expressions, their movements precise and unhurried. At the center stood Captain Sarah Chun, her gray hair tied back, her dark eyes studying the tactical display with the patience of someone who had been waiting years for this moment. She wore a simple uniform with few decorations, but every person on that bridge knew her history. She had commanded one of the destroyers at Proxima, had watched her fleet cut to pieces by Velkar arrogance, had barely escaped with her ship intact while good people died around her. Zarkith's image flickered with static as his ship's system struggled with the sheer power emanating from eternal vigilance. "You cannot threaten us with a single ship," he blustered. "I command 200 vessels. Even if this monstrosity is real, you are outnumbered." "1 vessel," Chun agreed. "For now. But let me be clear about what this 1 vessel can do." She gestured to her weapons officer. "Target the 4th moon of the planet to our starboard. Fire 1 shot. Make it a light one." A single beam of coherent energy lanced out from Eternal Vigilance's secondary weapons array. The beam was almost beautiful, a column of white light that seemed thin and delicate against the vastness of space. It struck the moon, a barren rock about the size of Earth's Luna. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the moon simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris cloud. The energy beam had been so intense, so concentrated, that it had converted the entire satellite to superheated plasma in an instant. Where a moon had orbited seconds before, there was now only an expanding sphere of glowing gas, already beginning to dissipate. The Velkar bridge erupted in panicked voices. 1 shot. That was their secondary armament. How many such weapons does this ship possess? Chun let the silence stretch before responding. "Commander Zarkith, you came here to break us, to end our expansion, to show the galaxy that humans should kneel before the sovereignty." She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a deadly calm. "Instead, you are going to turn your fleet around. You are going to return to your council. And you are going to tell them that humanity's time of being mocked is over." The view screen showed Zarkith struggling for words, his earlier arrogance shattered like glass. "And if we refuse," he finally managed. "What then?" Chun's smile was cold. "Then I will demonstrate what our primary weapons can do, and there will be no Velkar fleet left to return home at all. I am giving you 1 chance, Commander. 1 chance to be the leader who saved his people from annihilation, instead of the fool who led them to it. Choose wisely." The channel closed before Zarkith could respond. On the bridge of Eternal Vigilance, the crew waited in perfect silence. They had trained for this moment, prepared for years in secret. Now they watched to see if their demonstration had been enough, or if words would have to give way to the terrible mathematics of war. When Giant's WHV the Velkar fleet hung in space like prey frozen before a predator. On the bridge of the inexorable judgment, Supreme Commander Zarkith stared at the tactical display where a barren moon had existed moments before. His crew was silent, waiting for orders that he found himself unable to give. Every instinct screamed at him to attack, to show strength, to prove that the sovereignty would not be intimidated. But those instincts were warring with a newer, unfamiliar sensation: doubt. Tactical analysis complete, his weapons officer reported, mandibles clicking nervously. The human vessel designated Eternal Vigilance measures 15.2 kilometers in length, 6.8 kilometers at maximum beam. Estimated mass exceeds anything in our database. The energy signature from that single shot equates to the entire output of our fleet's main, batteries firing simultaneously for 6 hours. Zarkith S antenna flattened against his skull. That cannot be accurate. Check again. Sir, another officer interjected. We are detecting additional power sources activating across their hull. They were operating at approximately 42% capacity. They are now at 58% and still climbing. Whatever that ship truly is, we have not yet seen its full capability. The communications officer's voice trembled. Commander, we are receiving transmissions from the fleet. Multiple captains are requesting guidance. Some are suggesting we fall back to defensive positions. Zarkith's mandibles ground together in frustration. Defensive positions, he snarled. Against one ship. Have we become cowards? But even as he spoke the words, his gaze kept drifting back to the view screen, where Eternal Vigilance loomed like a dark god. The vessel was turning slowly, presenting its full profile to the Vulkar fleet. Along its flanks, hundreds of weapon ports were visible now, each one glowing with restrained power. The ship was not hiding its strength. It was displaying it deliberately, letting them count every cannon, every missile tube, every energy projector. It was psychological warfare at its most primal, and it was working. Inside Eternal Vigilance, Captain Sarah Chun walked slowly around the central holographic display. The Vulkar fleet was fragmenting, individual ships drifting apart as their captain's discipline wavered. 3 years ago, these same ships had torn through her squadron, like wolves among sheep. She remembered the screams over the communications channels as the Vulkar tore into her vessels with gleeful efficiency. She remembered the names and faces of the officers who had died that day. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, who had been planning his daughter's birthday party. Commander Patricia Williams, who had served 30 years and was just 6 months from retirement. Ensign David Kim, 23 years old on his first deep space assignment. They had all burned while the Vulkar had laughed. Captain, the sensor officer called out, "The enemy fleet is realigning. They are not retreating, but they are not attacking either. They appear to be waiting." Chun nodded slowly, waiting for us to show weakness or for their commander to find his courage. Let them wait. She turned to her executive officer, Commander James Morrison, a tall man with silver hair and the same haunted look that came from surviving Proxima. "What is the status of our sister ships?" Morrison checked his display. Immovable object and unstoppable force are holding position at coordinates, designated as anchor points, Omega and Sigma respectively. Silent Watch remains in deep stealth at the edge of the system. If this engagement goes hot, we have full support available within 30 minutes. Sean felt a grim satisfaction at that. The galaxy thought Eternal Vigilance was humanity's desperate gamble, a single superweapon built with the last of Earth's resources. They had no idea that 3 more Leviathan-class dreadnoughts existed, each one as powerful as this vessel. Humanity had learned its lesson well. Never again would they be caught unprepared. Never again would they rely on hope when they could rely on overwhelming force. The secret construction project had consumed every spare resource Earth and its colonies could muster. Engineers had worked in sealed facilities in the asteroid belt, the ships assembled in sections that were only joined together in deep space far from prying eyes. The cost had been astronomical, But watching the Velkar fleet hesitate made every sacrifice worthwhile. On the Velkar flagship, Zarkith was having a heated conversation with his senior officers. Some urged immediate retreat, arguing that fighting was suicide. Others demanded an attack, claiming that their numerical advantage must count for something. A few suggested attempting to negotiate, though they voiced this option quietly, knowing how the sovereignty viewed compromise with inferior species. "This is impossible," his chief tactical officer insisted. "No civilization can advance from primitive destroyers to this in 3 cycles. They must have had help, perhaps from one of the elder species. Or, a quieter voice suggested, perhaps we underestimated their capacity for development." Zarkith wanted to reject that idea outright, but he could not ignore the evidence floating before them. The humans had done something remarkable. They had been beaten, humiliated, shown their place in the galactic order. And instead of accepting defeat, they had retreated into silence and built something that changed every calculation. It was not just the ship's size that troubled him. It was the implication. If humans could construct this, what other surprises had they prepared? How many of these vessels existed? The question gnawed at him like acid. "Open a channel to the human vessel," he ordered finally. "If we are to die here, I will at least understand why." The view screen activated again, showing Captain Chun standing calmly at the center of her bridge. "Commander," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "Have you reached a decision?" Zarkith drew himself up to his full height, trying to project authority he no longer felt certain of. "I wish to understand. 3 cycles ago, we left your fleet broken. Your ships were burning wrecks. Your people were defeated. Now you appear with this," and he gestured at the image of eternal vigilance, "challenging everything we know about technological progression. How?" Chun's expression was unreadable. "You left us burning, Commander." "That part is true. But you made a critical mistake. You assumed that survivors would break. Instead, we remembered. We analyzed. We adapted. She began walking as she spoke, her image moving across the Volcar view screen. "When you destroyed our ships at Proxima, you were not fighting Earth's Navy. You were fighting the Colonial Defense Fleet, vessels we purchased from salvage yards and repurposed for patrol duty. Our actual fleet, our real military capability, was still under construction. We had been building in secret for 5 years before you attacked. Your assault taught us that our timeline was too slow, that we needed to accelerate, to put aside every other priority and focus on one goal, ensuring we would never be at anyone's mercy again." Zarkith felt his certainty crumbling. "You built 4 of these vessels," he said quietly, the tactical analysis having finally pierced together the truth from the energy signatures detected at various points in the system. "4 is correct," Chun confirmed. "This is eternal vigilance. Her sister ships are immovable object, unstoppable force, and silent watch. Each one is independently capable of engaging and defeating your entire fleet." Together, she paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Together, they redefine what naval superiority means in this sector. The Velkar bridge had gone completely silent. Every officer was staring at the view screen, comprehending the magnitude of what they faced. "Commander," Chun continued, her voice taking on a harder edge, "you came here expecting to finish a war you thought you had already won. Instead, you have discovered that the war never ended. We simply chose to fight it on our terms, in our time, with weapons you could not imagine. Now, I am going to give you a choice, and I will only offer it once. You can order your fleet to turn around and leave human space. Return to your council and tell them that humanity is no longer prey. Tell them that our worlds are protected by vessels that make your dreadnoughts look like children's toys. Tell them that the age of pushing us around has ended. That is option 1. Zarkith's hearts were pounding. And option 2. Chun's eyes were cold. Option 2 is that you can choose pride over survival. You can order your fleet to attack. And in the next 10 minutes, I will demonstrate exactly why that would be the last decision you ever make. Your ships will be reduced to debris. Your crews will die. And the sovereignty will lose 200 vessels without inflicting a single casualty on my command. Then I will turn my attention to your supply bases, your staging grounds, and your council chambers themselves. The threat hung in the air like a drawn blade. Zarkith knew his next words would define not just his legacy, but possibly the fate of the entire sovereignty. He looked at his officers, saw the fear in their eyes, the calculations they were making. He thought about the tens of thousands of crew members under his command, soldiers who had trusted him to lead them to glory. What he had led them to was a trap disguised as an easy victory. Your terms, he said finally, the words like ash in his mouth. What would you require for us to withdraw peacefully? Chun did not hesitate. Full retreat from all human colonial zones. Recognition of our territorial boundaries. A formal declaration from your council that humanity is no longer to be threatened or harassed. And most importantly, her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. A message to every species in this galaxy that humans are not to be underestimated again. Before Zarkith could respond, alarms erupted across his bridge. Sir, a junior officer cried out, I am detecting movement from the human vessel. Their primary weapons array is activating. Chun's voice cut through the chaos. Commander, one of your cruisers just charged its weapons and locked targeting on my ship. I am interpreting that as a hostile act. You have 10 seconds to stand down before I respond. 5 Velkar destroyers just broke formation and are moving toward us. Commander Zarkith began, but his own tactical officer interrupted. Sir, it is the 3rd Squadron. Captain Vreshenak is not responding to our hails. He appears to be attacking without orders. On Eternal Vigilance's bridge, the weapons officer looked to Captain Chun for orders. The 5 Velkar destroyers were accelerating hard, their guns charging, missiles being loaded. It was a suicide run, perhaps an attempt by a brave or foolish captain to salvage Velkar honor. Chun's expression did not change. Point defense systems only, she commanded. Show them what precision means. The space around Eternal Vigilance came alive with light. Hundreds of turrets rotated with mechanical precision, tracking the incoming vessels. The destroyers opened fire first, their weapons flashing as they released everything they had. Plasma bolts, kinetic missiles, energy beams, all of it racing toward the human dreadnought in a cascade of destructive force. None of it reached the hull. Eternal Vigilance's point defense grid was beyond anything the Velkar had conceived. Laser clusters calculated trajectories in microseconds, intercepting missiles before they traveled more than a few kilometers. Energy shields absorbed plasma bolts that should have melted armor, the power dissipating harmlessly across the dreadnought's surface. Kinetic rounds were struck by counterfire and exploded into clouds of harmless debris. The 5 destroyers fired continuously, emptying their magazines in a desperate barrage. Not one shot touched its target. Then Eternal Vigilance returned fire. The turrets that had been swatting aside missiles now turned their attention to the attacking vessels. Precision beams, no wider than a human fist, lanced out across the void. They did not strike randomly. They hit engines, weapon systems, shield generators. One by one, the destroyers were crippled with surgical accuracy. No hull breaches, no casualties, just comprehensive systematic dismantling of their ability to fight. Within 90 seconds, all 5 vessels were dead in space, powerless and drifting. Their crews were alive but defeated, their ship reduced to inert metal coffins. The remaining Velkar fleet watched in absolute horror. That, Captain Chun said into the open channel, is what restraint looks like. I disabled those ships because Commander Zarkith did not order the attack, and I am willing to believe it was not his intent. But understand this." She leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of her command console. "That was point defense. That was the system we used to protect ourselves from missiles and fighters. I have not yet fired a single main weapon. If I do, there will be no disabled ships left to recover. There will only be expanding clouds of plasma where your vessels used to be." The silence that followed was absolute. On the Velkar flagship, Zarkith stared at his tactical display where 5 of his best destroyers floated helplessly, defeated without being destroyed. The precision was terrifying. It spoke of computational power and targeting systems generations beyond anything the sovereignty possessed. "Stand down," he ordered, his voice carrying across every ship in his fleet. "All vessels, stand down immediately. Power down weapon systems. Prepare for full retreat." Some of his officers looked relieved. Others seemed devastated, their pride shattered. But none argued. They had seen enough. "Commander," Chun's voice was softer now, almost sympathetic. "You came here today expecting to end a war. Instead, you prevented one. Returning to your council with this news will be difficult. They will question your courage, your judgment. But you will have saved thousands of lives, including those of your own people. That is not weakness. That is wisdom." Zarkith's mandibles clicked in what might have been bitter laughter or grudging respect. "Captain Chun, when your people were broken at Proxima, did you know then what you would build?" Chun was quiet for a moment before answering. "I knew that we would never be broken again. I knew that humans are at their most dangerous when they are underestimated. You taught us that lesson, Commander. Be grateful that we chose to teach it back to you without annihilating your fleet. Now go home. Tell your council that Earth is protected. Tell them that humanity has entered a new age. And tell them that the next commander who enters our space with hostile intent will not be given the choice you received today." The view screen went dark. On the bridge of eternal vigilance, Captain Chun allowed herself a long breath. Around her, the crew remained at their stations, professional and focused. But she could see the subtle relaxation in their shoulders, hear the quiet exhales of relief. They had been ready to fight, prepared to unleash the full fury of their weapons, but they had hoped it would not come to that. Today, it had not. Commander Morrison approached quietly. "Orders, Captain. Monitor their retreat until they clear our territorial boundaries. Have Silent Watch shadow them for an additional 12 hours to ensure they do not regroup. Then begin the broadcast." "What broadcast?" Chun's smile was small but genuine. "The one that changes everything." Within the hour, a message transmitted across every major communications network in the galaxy. It was delivered by Captain Sarah Chun, standing on the bridge of eternal vigilance with the massive viewports behind her showing the vast expanse of stars. "People of the galaxy," she began, "for too long, humanity has been viewed as weak, primitive, unworthy of respect. We have been attacked, dismissed, and underestimated. Today, that ends. Behind me is the Leviathan-class dreadnought Eternal Vigilance, one of 4 such vessels now protecting Earth and her colonies. We did not build these ships to conquer. We built them to ensure that we will never again be at anyone's mercy. To those species who have treated us with respect and friendship, know that our hand remains open. We seek cooperation, trade, and mutual prosperity. But to those who view humanity as prey, to empires built on subjugation and fear, understand this." She gestured to the darkness behind her. Visible through the viewport was the distant glow of the Velkar fleet retreating at maximum speed. "Your time of unchallenged dominance has ended. Humanity is no longer a minor species to be bullied. We are a force capable of defending ourselves and our interests. Test us at your peril." The broadcast ended, but its echoes would ripple across the galaxy for years to come. In council chambers on 1,000 worlds, leaders watched the message and recalculated their policies toward Earth. Some with anger, some with fear, some with newfound respect. The Velkar sovereignty received Commander Zarkith coldly, but they could not ignore his report or his survival. On Earth, in the orbital shipyards where the Leviathan-class vessels had been born, workers celebrated. 3 years of secrecy, sacrifice, and backbreaking labor had paid off. The galaxy had mocked them. Now the galaxy would remember them. Captain Sarah Chun stood alone in her ready room aboard Eternal Vigilance, looking at a photo on her desk. Lieutenant Rodriguez, Commander Williams, Ensign Kim, and dozens more, all the faces of those lost at Proxima. "We remembered you," she whispered to the images. "We built this for you, so that no other crew would burn while enemies laughed, so that humanity would never again be helpless. You are avenged not through destruction, but through strength." Rest well. Outside her window, the stars shone with possibilities. Earth's navy had proven itself. The age of being mocked had ended. And somewhere in the darkness of space, 3 more Leviathan-class dreadnoughts stood silent vigil, waiting for the day they might be needed. Humanity had learned its lesson. Never again would they be caught unprepared. The galaxy had laughed at Earth's navy. Now they would learn to respect it. The giants had awakened, and they would walk among the stars, not as conquerors, but as equals who would bow to no one. The shadow had been cast. The message had been sent. And the universe would never forget the day humanity stopped being prey and became predators. End of story **.